My sister and niece are moving in with us. You, a stranger, should go live in some cheap apartment, Henry said, leaving me wide-eyed in disbelief. I was so shocked, my mouth hung open. Not knowing can be terrifying. This house, owned by my in-laws, is actually in my name, Lisa. While I'm okay with transferring the ownership to Henry, I can't believe I'm still paying the $3,600 mortgage on it. After thinking for a while, I smiled and said, I can move out, but then I'd want a divorce. Henry smirked back at me. Well, Dad's gone, and you're of no use to me anymore, he said almost casually. Since you brought it up, don't expect any share of the property. His condescending tone made me lower my face and cover my mouth. Okay, I replied, trembling. Hearing my shaky voice, Henry burst into laughter. Cry all you want. Did you think I'd beg you to stay? Blame yourself for being abandoned by your husband, he taunted. Clenching my fists, I held back my tears, or rather my laughter. Henry had no idea what was coming for him, thinking he had the upper hand. To distract myself, I thought about where I would live next. Oh, that place would be perfect. A $2 million luxury condo sprang to mind. I'm Lisa, 34 years old. My husband Henry is 36 and works as an administrative staff member at a private girls' high school. He's quite popular among the students, receiving multiple gifts on his birthday. Whenever this happens, he would make a face as if to say, "Give me a break." I hope you don't make that face in front of the girls who give you those gifts, I once remarked. He just clicked his tongue in response, as if I would. But why do they give them to me even though I wear a wedding ring? It's nice to receive them, I said, reminiscing about my own high school days when I had a crush on a teacher 10 years my senior. Hey, if a scandal starts at my workplace, it spreads viciously, Henry would say. That's where he's serious. Thankfully, despite the attention from young students, I never worried about him crossing the line. His earnestness must come from his father, who was a teacher too. We live with Henry's parents in their house. We planned to move out once we had kids, but unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet. I also work part-time, but we don't have much savings beyond what Henry brings in. Living with my in-laws is comfortable. They're very kind to me. My main concern now is my father-in-law's deteriorating health. He's finding it harder to walk and can't enjoy his beloved walks as much anymore, so we bought a wheelchair to take him out as much as possible. I switched to a morning shift at a bakery so I could spend the afternoons with my in-laws. My parents are no longer with us, so I treasure my in-laws like my own parents. My parents left me some inheritance, but I still wish they were here. Henry has an older sister named Kelly, 4 years his senior. Kelly has a husband who works for a major company and a 17-year-old daughter named Rachel. Henry and I got married 10 years ago. Back then, Kelly, who was already working, often left Rachel at our parents' house, so I've always been close to Rachel. She adores me like a real sister. Being an only child, I was thrilled, and we still keep in touch regularly even though she doesn't need to stay with us anymore. In contrast, Kelly and I never really got along. From the first time I met her parents, I didn't have a good impression of Kelly. The first thing she said to me was I thought he would choose someone cuter, and she laughed. Henry didn't defend me. If his parents hadn't been angry with Kelly at that time, I probably wouldn't have married Henry. I don't choose just by looks. What's inside matters to me for marriage, Henry later said, trying to make amends. But it didn't resonate with me. I felt his parents cared for me more as they immediately got angry on my behalf. That's when I decided I wanted to repay my in-laws for their kindness as I couldn't do so for my own parents. Recently, Kelly often comes back home. She doesn't talk to me about it, but I overhear her talking to Henry and his parents. Apparently, Kelly and her husband are constantly fighting. Despite both working, she gets nagged for not doing enough housework. Well, if I had a part-time job like Lisa, I could handle the housework too. But I work full-time, she said snidely, glancing at me. That's how Kelly always is, comparing herself to me. She's probably been competing with me since her parents defended me when we first met, And because Henry ended up defending me, her anger only grew. Lisa only manages because her mom helps her. If she were alone, she wouldn't cope at all, Henry chimed in and laughed. Right. Lisa doesn't even have kids and gets help from mom. It's a given Lisa can handle the household chores. Seriously, she's not even doing that well. Kelly's doing better, right? The two of them laughed at me, but when our eyes met with my mother-in-law's cold gaze, Henry quickly cleared his throat. But Lisa is really trying hard, you know. She's been taking care of Dad since his legs got bad. Ignoring Kelly's surprised look, I went to the bedroom. Worried, I called Rachel. She said calmly, "Oh, that's just Mom being unreasonable." She could do household chores while Rachel was at school, but for some reason she didn't. From what Rachel said, it didn't seem like she was being unfairly scolded. Henry generally sides with Kelly. Kelly is competitive with me, and it seems like Henry is competitive with his brother-in-law, who works at a prestigious company. But in my opinion, Henry is clearly losing. His brother-in-law contributes much more financially to his family. It's not about earning less, it's about how much of their salary they spend on their family. I don't know the exact details of Henry's income, and he doesn't seem to know or care about how much money I have or earn from my part-time job. I just wish he would contribute enough to live comfortably within his means. I don't even know what he does with the rest of his salary. Sometimes he comes home late saying out with colleagues. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But Henry, who dislikes being the subject of students' rumors, wouldn't cheat. At least, that's what I believed. Henry contributes $2,000 to the household. Normally, this would barely be enough to live on. This alone could be a reason for constant fights or even divorce. It's my family's house, so we don't need rent, right? But really, $2,000 is a bit. Why don't you ask your parents to contribute to the living expenses? It's not about that. It seemed like he just couldn't understand what I was trying to say. I wasn't asking him to support all three of us alone. But his words and attitude showed a lack of responsibility towards the family. You can say such things after you have kids like Callie, he added, knowing it would hurt me. I realized then that my husband could care for his sister but not his wife. Meanwhile, my father-in-law's legs were getting worse. Our house, surrounded by slopes, wasn't suitable for wheelchair use. Why don't we move? I proposed to my in-laws when Henry wasn't around. But the budget. We can use the money from selling this house and I'll pay the remaining loan, I offered. My in-laws exchanged glances. But you shouldn't have to bear such costs. You're already contributing more to the living expenses than Henry, aren't you? My mother-in-law said apologetically. It's okay, I assured her. I have an inheritance from my parents. Using it for you would make them happy. By then, I may have lost almost all my love for Henry, but I still liked my in-laws and wanted to continue living with them. We talked to Henry, and we all decided to move to a new house. We remodeled it for accessibility, with handrails installed for my father-in-law's ease. I think the new house is much more comfortable for him. In the old house, even going to the bathroom was difficult. But here he can go safely. Initially, my in-laws were hesitant, but they relaxed when I agreed to one condition, keeping the new house in my name without telling Henry. Also, they didn't want Henry to know about my inheritance. If Henry learns about your money, he'll rely on you even more. We can't allow that, my father-in-law said. He was trying to protect me from Henry relying on my parents' inheritance, which touched me deeply. I wish I was healthier and not such a burden, my father-in-law apologized. I waved my hands. It's not a burden at all. I look forward to our daily walks. My words were met with a warm smile from my father-in-law. Thank you. My father-in-law has lost his appetite and weight since he couldn't walk much. I hope the new environment would help him regain his health. I truly wish for it from the bottom of my heart. Wow, what a beautiful house, Kelly exclaimed during a visit. Walking around without restraint, she tapped on the handrails. But these handrails are in the way, they ruin the look. I think my father-in-law's safety is more important than how it looks. She didn't like my response and just snorted, saying nothing more. We always keep the toilet seat up to make it easier for my father-in-law. We clean regularly to avoid any odors. Lowering the seat means bending or squatting, which is hard for him. Despite explaining this to Kelly, she keeps closing it. No matter how many times I explained, she wouldn't stop. Once I heard a loud crash from the bathroom. My father-in-law had fallen while trying to open the seat. He lost his balance while trying to open the toilet lid. "I've told you not to close it," I said sternly to Kelly while helping him up. I couldn't forgive her this time, even if she was my sister-in-law. Thankfully, he wasn't seriously hurt. But that wasn't the point. But leaving the toilet lid open is unhygienic, isn't it? And it's not good for feng shui to leave it like that, she argued. That's not the point, Kelly. Do you want to hurt Dad? This time, it was my usually calm mother-in-law who was angry. Mom, Kelly didn't mean any harm. Exactly. It's an exaggeration to say I would hurt Dad. Kelly laughed, but my mother-in-law's anger didn't subside. Get out right now, she demanded, driving Kelly away. For a while, we could live in peace, but my relief was short-lived. Soon after, we discovered my father-in-law had cancer. It had already spread throughout his body by the time it was found. There was nothing we could do, and he passed away just 6 months later. After the funeral, I overheard a conversation from the living room that shocked me. "Now that Dad's gone, this house will be yours, right?" Kelly asked. "I wonder. Maybe it's left to Mom," Henry speculated. My mother-in-law's face tensed up. "It's good he didn't suffer long. Caring for him would have been hard, right?" "Well, yeah, but we have a handy housekeeper here." "Oh, that's harsh." I quickly grabbed my mother-in-law's wrist as she moved to open the living room door, shaking my head to signal her not to show her anger. "Maybe Rachel and I should move in too," Kelly said cheerfully. Inside, I felt as angry as I looked. I had another reason to be angry at Henry. When preparing for the funeral, I found receipts from questionable establishments while organizing his suits. There were several of them in his bag, the addresses far away, probably thinking they wouldn't be traced back to his school or the students. The thought of him using the money he didn't bring home on such things infuriated me. By then, I was already planning how to kick Henry out of the house. "My sister and niece are moving in. You, a stranger, can go live in some cheap apartment," Henry suddenly announced a few days after the funeral ended. I was stunned, unable to comprehend what he was saying. Apparently, Kelly and her husband had been fighting, and she decided to move back to her parents' house, thinking her husband would apologize and ask them to come back. Oh, I see. That's her plan. I never thought they would try to kick me out. But Henry was unaware that the house was in my name, and I had been paying the $3,600 mortgage on it. Though I had only thought of ways to get Henry out, now I realized another option. I smiled. "I'll move out, but then I want a divorce. If I were to leave, I needed a divorce so I wouldn't be harmed in the end." But Henry, unaware of my thoughts, just grinned back. "Well, now that Dad's gone, you're of no use to me," he said with a dismissive look. "Since you brought it up, there won't be any division of property." His condescending tone made me lower my face and cover my mouth. "Okay," I replied, trembling. Hearing my shaky voice, Henry laughed loudly. "Cry all you want. Did you think I'd beg you to stay? Blame yourself for being abandoned by your husband." Clenching my fists, I struggled to hold back my laughter, knowing he had no idea what was coming for him. To distract myself from the ridiculousness of the situation, I thought about where to live next. Oh, that place would be perfect. I envisioned the $2 million luxury condo left to me by my parents. The real estate agent I hired mentioned that the family currently renting one of my properties was planning to move out soon. My parents left me several properties, and the rent from them provides me with a comfortable living. Among these, the condo, my parents' dream home, is special. I wasn't very interested in it before, but living in the last home my parents stayed in doesn't seem like a bad idea. However, I'm worried about something. If I move there, I'll end up living with my mother-in-law and Rachel. I've been racking my brain trying to find a way to rescue them from living with those two. When I leave after divorcing Henry, I'll go to a facility my mother-in-law announced to Henry and Kelly when I told them about my decision to leave. What? Why? Kelly's coming back to live here. Yeah, Dad will be lonely if you say things like that. Dad will be lonely. I wondered what the daughter who said it was good that her father passed away was thinking. But at that moment, a plan came to my mind. I whispered to my mother-in-law, making sure the other two didn't hear, if they won't let me leave, getting kicked out is the next best thing. I ended up staying in the house for a while with the divorce as a condition, sharing a room with my mother-in-law until I found a new place to move. We executed our plan when Kelly and Rachel moved in. Hey, there's no dinner for Dad, my mother-in-law said during dinner, causing the other three to freeze. What? What are you talking about? Dad passed away. Henry was shocked. Kelly got angry, and Rachel looked worriedly at my mother-in-law. It was hard to keep Rachel in the dark, but it was necessary not to raise suspicion. How can you say such things? Apologize to Dad. It's bad luck to talk like that, right, Dad? My mother-in-law spoke to the empty chair where my father-in-law used to sit. I prepared a meal for him too, maintaining the charade. She continued to behave as if my father-in-law was still there. If you close the toilet lid, Dad will be troubled. This was to punish Kelly and Henry, who had laughed at my late father-in-law. I also wanted to see if they would take responsibility for taking care of my mother-in-law. Kelly roughly grabbed her hand and took her to his portrait. Where's Dad? He's gone. Look, there's the altar, Kelly yelled. Unfazed, my mother-in-law sat down opposite the altar. He's right here, she said, her gaze toward the altar and beyond. All your horrible words and actions, Dad is watching, always, my mother-in-law said in a calm, cold voice. Kelly looked horrified. Stop it, she cried, leaving the room. As expected, Kelly was the first to crack. Mom's gone senile, but the doctor says there's nothing wrong with her, right? Yes, she acts completely normal in public and in front of the neighbors. It's driving me crazy. Right? But we still have the mortgage to pay, and without Mom's pension. I overheard them whispering in the living room as I pretended not to listen while doing the dishes. Finding a facility won't be easy, and it's expensive. Kelly, can you afford it? What? Of course not. Have to pay Rachel's college tuition until she graduates. It seemed they were more concerned about the mortgage and money than about my mother-in-law. Such pathetic people. I turned off the tap and interrupted their conversation. I've found a new home. I can take Mom with me until we find a good facility. They looked at each other and I added, and about the mortgage, I've been the one paying it? What? Really? So that means, Henry mumbled to himself. The part-time income minus living expenses, that's the amount that can be paid. I thought Henry would conclude he probably thinks now that Kelly's income is here, we're set. Pretending not to hear, I smiled at Henry. If Mom and I leave, I'll transfer the ownership and mortgage payments to you. Okay. Okay, he simply replied. I felt relieved that I could protect my mother-in-law, but then a new problem, or rather a convenient situation for us, arose. Rachel, returning home from high school, approached me with a serious look for a consultation. She suspected Kelly might be having an affair. Apparently, one of Rachel's friends saw Kelly walking arm in arm with a man in a suit at night, someone different from her husband. The friend, who knew Rachel's dad, confided in Rachel that it was definitely not her father. On further inquiry, I learned these sightings happened while Rachel was at school. Kelly's neglect of household responsibilities wasn't because she was a mother or working. It was due to her affairs during the hours Rachel was away. I assured Rachel to leave this matter to me and made her promise not to tell anyone. I then quickly hired a private investigator to look into Kelly's infidelity. Maybe Kelly felt relaxed since she was separated from her husband, or perhaps she was contemplating divorce as well, but she let her guard down too soon. They were still legally married. The evidence gathered by the investigator confirmed her affair, leading her husband to initiate divorce proceedings. Rachel was to be taken in by her father, and Kelly faced demands for child support from her husband. Relieved, my mother-in-law and I left the family home and moved into the $2 million condo. One peaceful evening, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I checked, Henry and Kelly were there. "What do you want?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "You're not answering your phone," Henry retorted angrily. "I'll be right out," I told my worried mother-in-law, not intending to let them into the house or even past the automatic doors. I thought I'd let them off the hook if they had stayed quiet. Sighing, I went up to the entrance hall. "Let's not talk here," I suggested and drove us to a nearby cafe. In the car, Henry kept asking, "How can you afford to live in such a fancy condo?" "It was left to me by my parents. I have been renting it out until now." "Why did you tell me something so important?" Henry demanded. I felt a twitch in my temple. Why should I? I've always contributed my share for living expenses, and this property doesn't fall under property division. After all, it was Henry who had insisted on no division of property. Upon reaching the cafe, their real concern turned out to be the mortgage at the family home. "Why is it so high? $3,600 a month." Henry fumed in a raised voice, barely containing his desire to yell. I sipped my coffee slowly and then smiled. "That's the value of living in such a house, isn't it? Don't joke around." Henry slammed the table, drawing attention. Kelly intervened, trying to calm him down. "But Lisa, you should have mentioned such a high mortgage." Their desperation almost made me laugh. No sign of gratitude for all the months I had been paying that amount. "You never asked, and you pretty much left the whole name change process to me, didn't you?" I hinted at their unfairness. But then again, it was understandable. Kelly was facing demands for child support from Rachel's father. She had also quit her job after the affair became known at work. As far as I was concerned, it was all self-inflicted. I turned to Kelly and said with a smile, "Tough situation, huh?" "What do you mean? Henry doesn't contribute much to the house." Kelly looked at Henry. Feeling her gaze, he mumbled, "Well, it's not like that." "Oh, right. We've only been out of the house for a few days." I realized she hadn't caught on yet. Henry warned me in a low voice, "Don't say unnecessary things." "What do you mean?" Kelly's eyes turned to me, demanding an explanation. I shrugged and pulled out several papers from my bag. "He only put in $2,000 and spent the rest at places like these," I said, laying out dubious receipts on the table. "What is this? You've been going to these kinds of places." Kelly expressed her disgust and outrage, reading the names of the establishments aloud. "You're an idiot. That's disgusting." Kelly's outburst after tossing away the receipts seemed to hit a nerve with Henry. "What are you talking about? You're the one who's disgraceful, having an affair with a colleague." Their ugly spat unfolded right before me, making me want to tell them they were both equally to blame. As they argued, I quietly observed, sipping my coffee. Judging that a complaint from the cafe might be imminent, I spoke to Henry. "Oh, right, sorry about that," I said, prompting him to stop arguing with Kelly. There was a sense of alertness in his tone, recognizing that he should be cautious. "What?" he asked, sounding probing. "I forgot to mention there's a popular recreation center near this cafe." "Huh?" They both looked at me, puzzled, not grasping my point yet. "Many students hang out here after school." I leaned in and whispered to Henry. "See familiar uniforms everywhere. I wonder how many of them are here." Suddenly, Henry stood up with a loud noise, noticing the gazes of the girls around us. I could hear their giggling. My choice of this cafe had finally sunk in for him. "Just so you know, I didn't raise my voice," I said. Standing, Henry looked down, trembling. His hand on the table was clenched so tightly it turned white. "Thanks for embarrassing yourself. School tomorrow should be interesting," I said, leaning in and grinning at him. He collapsed to the floor in defeat. Eventually, the family home was put up for sale, and Henry and Callie moved to an old, small apartment. Callie struggled to find a new job, and Henry resigned from the girls' school. Apparently, there were complaints from parents about inappropriate staff members. Even if the phone call hadn't come, Henry would have likely resigned, but the call spread the rumors even further. The reason I knew about this was that one of Rachel's friends attended the school where Henry worked and shared the news. As Henry feared, the story spread wildly. Hearing this from Rachel, my mother-in-law shook her head in disgust, and I couldn't help but laugh. Once Henry and Callie came begging for help, relying on my inheritance and my mother-in-law's pension. They apologized profusely, but I quickly sent them away, saying, "No need for apologies now." I continue to live with my mother-in-law, and Rachel often visits our condo. She loves the view from the windows as much as I do. We spend our days looking out at the vast sky my parents once admired. With the curtains wide open, we enjoy our meals, feeling on top of the world. I cherish this life, hoping to show the filial piety to my mother-in-law that I couldn't show to my parents.